Doing this right after you just got like I just got back into so I haven't even had time to have a line or a snack.
It's always midnight.
All right. This is a great crowd for a council meeting. So I want to welcome everyone to our McLean Mill Committee of the Whole meeting and thank all of you for joining us. Before we start, I want to let everyone know what our general process will be for our meeting today. The intent of today's meeting is for us to hear from you, to allow council to get a better understanding of what is a complex and long-standing topic in this community. There will be no decisions made at today's meeting. So in today's meeting, we'll first hear background information from our CAO, and then we'll hear from two delegations that we have on our agenda. Each delegation will have up to 10 minutes to speak, and once the delegations are finished, we are going to welcome input from the public. We want to hear from as many people as possible today, so I'm going to ask that people limit their comments to 2 minutes to allow as many people as possible the opportunity to speak today. Before we start, I also want to recognize the amazing amount of volunteer work that has gone into this site and all that's involved in it over the years. Regardless of each of our personal opinions on what the future of this site should look like, I think we can all recognize and appreciate the hard work and dedication that has been and continues to be contributed to this operation by probably hundreds of volunteers. So on behalf of City Council, we would like to thank everybody who has been involved for all of their work over the years. So with that said, I'm going to call our meeting to order and recognize that we're holding our meeting on the traditional territories of the Sushot and Hoopachesset First Nations. I'd also like to recognize that we have Freeman of the City, Ken McRae, and Donna Brett in the audience, and thank you for being here. Would somebody like to move approval of our agenda?
So moved, Madam Mayor. Second, Madam Mayor.
Second. Any questions or changes to the agenda? City Clerk?
Just a comment, Madam Mayor, that we have received some background information and materials as well as some public input which has not been distributed as late items at this point, but they will form part of a bigger report that will come back to Council. And some of the reference material may be referenced today by the presenters, but it will be made available to Council and the public going forward.
Okay. Thank you very much. All in favor of the agenda? Carried. Item B, we have adoption of minutes. We have minutes from the meeting held at 4 p.m. on December 17th, 2018. Would somebody like to move approval?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Second.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Any questions or changes to the minutes? All in favor? Carried. Okay, so that brings us to item C, which is from our CAO, an introduction and overview.
Madam Mayor, I'm very aware in this room that I'm not the most qualified person to tell you about the history of McLean Mill and how it came into city possession and the early years of oversight and management of that facility. We are fortunate that Dr. Jamie Morton is in the room, and if council wanted to know more about the origin of McLean Mill as a property of the city, then that is where if Jamie's willing, I'm sure that he could inform us on that. To facilitate this conversation, we've attached some documents to the agenda, and as Davina said, there's more documents have come in since the agenda was finalized. I can summarize those documents for you, and that'll help set this up somewhat. One of the documents is a cost-sharing agreement for McLean Mill National Historic Site. That is an agreement between the city and Heritage Canada, Parks Canada essentially, signed in July 1996 for a term of 42 years. And it envisions that the city is to operate, maintain, conserve, and present in the same condition as its conserved state, the McLean Mill site, essentially maintain its commemorative integrity. There was a $2.6 million provided by the federal government, provided the city spent the same or more. The city was obligated to manage the site in a way consistent with the management plan, unless agreed otherwise by Parks Canada. We haven't provided the management plan, and I suggest that might be a document that council will want to see in the future. The agreement envisioned that the conservation work would be completed within 4 years of execution of the agreement, and I have no reason to believe that it was not. We have the McLean Mill Society Constitution. McLean Mill Society, or MMS as it's known, was incorporated in December 2016, began managing McLean Mill in January of 2017. The society was established to operate and manage the McLean Mill site, to promote heritage tourism in Port Alberni and the Alberni Valley, to act in an advisory, coordinative, and supportive way with the Alberni Valley Museum and the West Vancouver Island Industrial Heritage Society to ensure the preservation and presentation of industrial heritage in the Alberni Valley, to facilitate the foregoing objectives through marketing, fundraising, project management, and the development of contemporary use assets to provide visitor services. MMS is a registered society of which the city is the only member. The MMS budget in 2017 was $225,000 for operating, an amount for insurance to cover the rail and the mill site, and $125,000 in capital. The intent was that MMS, consistent with their direction of origin when they were originated, their commitment was to invest in the revenue-generating methods in the first couple of years, and then to use new revenues to gradually reduce the operating subsidy. And the goal was a reduction of 50% reduction in the operating subsidy over 5 years. In the draft financial plan for 2019 that Council just considered in the previous meeting, there is $191,000 earmarked for operating for McLean Mill. That is $165,000 plus an amount for insurance, and $125,000 for capital. In your package is the operating and management agreement between the city and McLean Mill Society. That essentially is a rip-off of the previous document that the city agreement the city had with IHS to manage the site, with a few updates. And the final document is a mill assessment report by John Dam and Associates. Very informative. It identifies specific condition elements of historic structures at McLean Mill. The report states that a number of buildings noted are at risk of one level or another and need attention. It presents recommendations on maintenance and renewal work and priority ratings. And the report indicates that many of the buildings were found in 1990 to be in poor condition, were repaired at that time, and now almost 30 years later are in need of attention again. Madam Mayor, some of the late items that were submitted will be of interest to Council. If you want to have a look at those, we can put them on the screen.
I think let's start by moving through. I think there's a number of late items that have been submitted, and I think we need to have a full look at them and make them available to the public as well. So I would suggest that unless Council wants to pull out any specifically that we want to review in detail right now, that we keep moving with the meeting and we'll fully review those. Okay. Council, are there any questions on that overview? Okay. Thank you, CAO. Item D is correspondence. There's 2 items of correspondence. City Clerk, could you review them for us?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, just a couple of items that we received in time to attach to the agenda. One from Jim Del Rio. It's a copy of a newspaper article from the Canadian Press regarding the Tumbler Ridge Dinosaur Museum, which is facing closure. And also a lengthy letter from Roland Smith, including questions regarding McLean Mill and the Alberni Pacific Railway operations and budget for 2019.
Okay, thank you. Would somebody like to move receipt of the correspondence? Is there a seconder? Any questions on the correspondence? Okay. All in favor? Carried. So that brings us to item E, delegations, and our first one up is McLean Mill Society. Welcome, McLean Mill Society.
Down here. So I was hoping that I'd be able to do this without actually looking at my notes, but I'm not feeling very well and I just finished teaching about 20 minutes ago, so I will be referring to my notes. Thank you for everybody that comes out. It warms my heart to see how many people care about the site. And as you said earlier, whether we agree or disagree with how it's being run, it's fantastic that people are so caring and so involved with their site. And I think it's important to note how this brings out so many people. So the I'll give you a little bit of an overview from our point of view and some recommendations. The McLean Mill Society created a 5-year business plan and has just completed the second year of the plan. We did have light items because we were scrambling around over the Christmas holidays and that, trying to get all our items together. We knew that this was for information. We can provide any documents that anybody wants. I've actually got copies here so people can have them right now if they want hard copies or later tonight. The plan's available for anybody who wishes to see it. The business plan called for an evaluation of assets while conducting operations and seeking ways to increase revenue streams. So the first thing that I want to say before I even start is the IHS, the Steam Donkey Crew, the AVA, the Historic Society, all these people have worked so well with us, and we're so grateful to all the assistance that they've offered and provided for us, because they just pour their hearts and souls into this site. It's amazing to see. The MMS currently provides employment for community members through site operations and management, rail maintenance, locomotive operation, site management, event planning, site support, and youth employment in the summer. So it's important to know that this is an employment site for our community. Last year we had 8 summer students. That was tied with the aquarium. In terms of site infrastructure, the city applied for and received the grant that was talked about for the John Dam report. We stabilized the buildings this winter so that they could make it through the winter, and then the plan was to look at them in the spring and make a plan. And the city Parks and Recreation Department has already applied for a grant with Parks Canada to start doing that work. The city, MMS, and IHS conducted evaluations of the rail along with Southern Rail. Safety issues have been identified or in the process of being addressed. Ties were replaced in both years through contractors and through staff. So last year we were trying to get contractors to come and do some tie replacement, but Southern Rail had so many issues going on themselves, they just couldn't send people. So we just worked with our own internal staff and replaced ties as we went instead of getting a contractor to do it. Where am I? Vegetation management is planned for the upcoming year. The 3 locomotives, the number 7, the Alco, and the number 11, have all been evaluated by a qualified locomotive inspector. As we know, the number 7 steam train has been taken out of service this year due to breakdowns. Current estimates and timeframes indicate that the number 7 will be out of service for the upcoming year. We can have people that can speak way more fully to this in our audience, so I'd rather not kind of stop us on that point. The Alco was taken out of service earlier in the year after failing a safety inspection, but could be repaired, painted, and operational for around $30,000 or $40,000, we think. The number 11 has been used in the past, and we can use it, but there are some concerns with continued operation. It's not meant to be taking people up the Kitsexis grade. So in the first year of operations, a functioning kitchen was created in the visitor center. The visitor center was updated to provide a functional meeting space that included audio and the ability to host medium-sized events. There have been numerous comments on the functionality and beauty of that building, and weddings have been booking steadily, where we've got, I think, 17, possibly more weddings booked already for the upcoming years, and requests up into the following year. We also have a number of community events that are taking place there that are quite successful. This was done to provide extra revenue and has proved quite successful. The courtyard was updated with the deck lighting and functionality changes to the gift shop and office. This space has become really popular with visitors as they congregate around that area and have a place to sit. Popular community events include Jeepers Creepers and Breakfast with Santa. These 2 events we had planned on expanding to create a whole fall tourist season in the valley that would benefit not only McLean Mill but the community as a whole. Last year, a campground was created to provide accommodation for visitors, and many guests book that campground in tandem with weddings, because when people are hosting a wedding out there, they don't necessarily want to take cabs or have to drive themselves back into town. That's provided a further revenue stream that could be developed. So the plan for the upcoming 3 years was to focus on infrastructure and visitor experience. As the MMS now has a good understanding of the infrastructure needs, a long-term plan was being developed to implement repairs in an orderly fashion now that safety concerns have been addressed. And our plan was to have visitor experience enhancements, which would have included live interpretation along with signage to provide a lively, interactive, and engaging for visitors. As basic requirements for safety and infrastructure are met, the focus becomes more on providing increased revenue streams through events and visitor experience. So as things become more stable, then we can focus on the other things that we'd like to do. We have an excellent working relationship with the IHS and the AVA and the Steam Donkey folks. We currently have a request into Ottawa to determine requirements for receiving funding, as well as a list comparing us to other organizations that are similar. So we're just waiting to hear back from that. It's a formal request in the House of Commons. So so just our current update. So the buildings are winterized. We have 2 staff members on site right now, Ellie and Rochelle. We've brought Jamie Morton on board to assist with site management and act as the temporary APR manager. He's been a great asset with his tremendous expertise that he brings. Danger trees have been removed by an arborist. There was some concern about what happened there, but we had Aaron Toms come and remove those safety trees with the help of the IHS. Mill pond and environmental considerations. The city is responsible for the mill pond and looking into environmental considerations. Rail, so we think we installed about 400 ties last year using the 2 Trackman. It's kind of iffy between about 50 ties or so. The rail was also x-rayed and found to be in excellent condition with only 1 small defect, so that was a positive. Ties continue to be a problem and require replacement as per the 10-year agreement. Lights and signals experience sporadic malfunctions due to rust on the rail, so that's something that has to be looked at. Southern Rail has been monitoring for that, but it's definitely something we have to deal with. And the locomotives, so we have to, that's a point of discussion for people to talk about. So I just points to consider, the McLean Mill National Historic Site is really a treasure in our community. I don't think when I got into this, I even realized the scope of how many people in this community care deeply about the site and are very attached to it and spend hours and hours and hours of time, and also just what a great place it can be to tell our story and to provide a really good experience for people. Like it has a lot of potential. And so I just wanted to note, because there seems to be a bit of confusion, the MMS board is all volunteers, so nobody receives pay. We're all volunteers. It's been commented a few times that people think we're getting paid, and we are not getting paid. But we want to say it's the view of the MMS that the personal liability and responsibility for the operation of the site should be borne by the owner, the city of Port Alberni. We're liking the situation to that of a house. The city's the owner and the societies are somewhat like leaseholders. There are certain obligations required of owners that are not generally borne by leaseholders. So repairing sites that's a lot of work to ask like volunteers to take on, because it's significant work and it's safety. There's a lot of safety considerations. So recommendations, the McLean Mill Society would like to recommend that the city review the current structure with a view to defining the following roles. The city of Port Alberni, we would recommend that the city operate the McLean Mill Historic Site, railway, train station via contractor or city staff. We would recommend Jamie Morton. He's been excellent at providing, he knows more about the site than most people in Port Alberni, along with his, like Shelley and Kirsten. I mean, they know what's happening out there. And we find that the city should provide the following services: accounting, booking, payment services. Because for a small society to have to pay for all those things, it's not cost effective. Like, we're paying for our own POS, and we're paying for this, and we're paying for that, and it seems kind of silly considering the asset is the city's. So we would recommend the city should operate as a park and event site with live interpretation, providing benefit to the city and residents. The IHS, we think the City and Industrial Heritage Society should discuss the operation of the railroad if desired by both parties, and the railway could function as an independent entity. The IHS, we've already talked with them about this, and they'll be doing a presentation. Steam Donkey, the operators of the Steam Donkey should collaborate with the city to discuss operation of the Steam Donkey. It's a really great draw. The Historic Society should play a prominent role in operation of the site regarding preservation of the historic assets. And in terms of the McLean Mill Society, we would like to review the Constitution and bylaws and create more of a Friends of Society that can support the city and the IHS fully by doing fundraising and marketing and those things that we initially envisioned as being the role of the MMS. And we also would like to have a society where the city is not the member, but rather can attract members who are interested in fundraising. So that's, and we think that we worked really well with everybody. We're very collaborative. We think the city has done an excellent job in working with us. We want to commend all the staff from all departments and all levels on their professionalism and working with us. Tim's been great in providing guidance all along the way, as has Willa and Jamie and Shelley and Kirsten and Pat and everybody. And also the IHS, the directors and the folks on the ground have been stellar in helping us do things. And the Steam Donkey guys have always been there too. So everybody's been really working together well. Sorry, I hope I didn't run over my 10 minutes. I tried to talk fast.
You're actually at exactly 10 minutes, so thank you very much for that.
I also want to mention that we had asked Jamie to prepare something, but I don't know if you'll have time for him or not. But sorry, Jamie, I was trying to get through.
Thank you. So thank you very much for that. And thank you again to your entire board for all of the work that's been contributed. I think we probably will ask Dr. Martin to speak if he would like to. We'll go through the other delegations first, though, if that's okay. Council, are there any questions of Sheena from MMS?
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
I was like trying to sit
No
down.
questions.
Oh, no questions. Oh.
Thank you. Okay, so our next delegation is Industrial Heritage Society.
We're ready.
Thank you.
Oh, I'll raise it up a little bit.
Just a little.
I am standing up. Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor and Council, for the opportunity to speak this afternoon. I'm the president of the Western Vancouver Island Industrial Heritage Society. We like to call ourselves the Industrial Heritage Society, or sometimes you'll see it IHS. We're trying to shrink the name down. So the talk I'm going to give, and you can see it's already up there, is just, there's three segments to it: the past, the present, and the future. And the past, I could go on for a long, long time because we've been involved right from the start, but obviously I won't. I'll try and keep it brief. So some background. The Industrial Heritage Society is a non-profit, all-volunteer, and I'm going to say that again, non-profit, all-volunteer. Society formed in 1984. Our long-standing mandate is to restore, maintain, and operate the City of Port Alberni's historical industrial artifacts. Think about the trains, the historical trains and the historical trucks. And before I even get into the history, I have to break away and talk about the volunteers because there's a number of them here. I'm totally baffled by the amount of volunteering that happens with the train and out at the mill. It's truly humbling to be around these people. These people are incredible to be with. I'll be there until I get much, much grayer, so I plan on being around with the volunteers. The absolute key to our success is the exceptionally talented and utterly passionate volunteers that we have. It's unbelievable to see. Since 1980, 39 years ago, our volunteers have given their hearts and soul to restore the Alberni Valley's proud and unique heritage. The Industrial Heritage Society currently has 147 members, and I think that's the highest members to date. It's a relatively healthy number too. And there's a typo on there. It's since in 1980, a group of model railway enthusiasts with the blessing of the provincial railway inspector started restoring Port Alberni's favorite locomotive, the 1912, the two-spot, and it's a steam locomotive. 4 years later, in 1984, they started a short tourist run along the industrial waterfront. They restored the train and then they went, now what do we do? So let's start a tourist run. Soon after, they incorporated our own railway, and we are officially known as the Alberni Pacific Railway, or the APR. It didn't take us long to realize the popularity of steam trains, so we decided our prime objective was to power our trains with steam locomotives. Steam is so popular throughout the world. Starting with the 2-spot and now the 1929 number 7 steam locomotive, we have run steam trains for 31 years, steam trains for 31 years out of the last 35. We've always run trains, but 31 out of the 35 are steam. There are actually 7 locomotives that we look after. They're all stored. Most of them are stored down in the roundhouse. 6 are actually owned by the city of Port Alberni, and 1 is actually ours. We're restoring the one that we own. We're not just trains. Everyone thinks about that. Equally impressive is our award-winning, and it truly is award-winning. The ribbons that we've got is absolutely stunning. Restored truck collection. Most of these trucks are restored, maintained, and stored in the Port Alberni's former ice arena, which we call the Industrial Heritage Center. The volunteers from the Industrial Heritage Center have also traditionally assisted with the operation of the McLean Mill. Not only trucks, they'll take some of those restored trucks and take them out to the mill, or run steam donkeys or steam tractors out there. So the truckers are very prominent out at the McLean Mill. In the last 35 years, the APR has conservatively, and these are really conservative numbers. If we started crunching them, I'm sure they'll go way over that, have carried over 250,000 passengers. Think about it, 250,000 people on our own trains. We wowed, and this is really, I was thinking about this at work today, this number is completely out. Wowed tens of thousands of people in parades or shows in the Pacific Northwest. How about well over 100,000 people? We've gone to parades down in Victoria, down the center of Douglas Street, 10 to 20,000 people every time, and we did it 4 or 5 years in a row, so there's a lot of people. And we've welcomed over 200,000 visitors to the McLean Mill National Historic Site. Through our restoration efforts, we have inadvertently become unofficial ambassadors for the city of Port Alberni. Wherever we go, we hand out the pamphlets and we talk it up about Port Alberni and what a wonderful place it is to live and to visit. In the late 1980s, our society was very involved in the formation of the McLean Mill National Historic Site. I was on that board when we formed that. And so the mill opened in 2000, and we were the caretakers of the mill. From 2000 to 2016, we also operated the McLean Mill National Historic Site. A year after the mill opened, starting in 2001, we started running the number 7 steam locomotive to the McLean Mill. A phenomenal number of volunteers have either assisted with the operation of the mill, the maintenance of the mill, or running the steam train to and from the McLean Mill. Another key pillar of our success is the support of the city. And without the city, we'd be lost. This has either come from the Alberni Valley Museum, which is part of the city, or directly from the city. The Alberni Valley Museum has been instrumental in assisting us as we restore and showcase the city's remarkable industrial heritage collection. The Alberni Valley Museum has been an exceptional partner, and their professional and historical expertise has been invaluable to our success. The city's support has traditionally come from past mayors and city councils, with some overall guidance from the city manager. Tim, thank you very much. Again, we need your help, and we've done very well with Tim. We are restoring historical city assets, so the city should and must have necessary input for the historical collection. 2 years ago, the city formed the McLean Mill Society, the MMS, managed by volunteers, and gave them full control of the mill and the train. In the last 2 years, but more so in the last 6 months, the Industrial Heritage Society has developed an excellent working rapport with the MMS. And I can't emphasize the word excellent enough. Both societies now work cooperatively together as equal partners. We share back and forth the boards. We had a board-to-board meeting less than a week ago, so we talk a lot back and forth. Both societies now, we are fully supportive of the MMS initiatives in ultimately whatever is deemed appropriate for the McLean Mill, and that will be decided soon, I hope. So the present. As I've mentioned, the Industrial Heritage Society did operate the McLean Mill. What became readily apparent is that the mill has to be run with the full support of the city, with a realistic budget, by a talented and qualified professional or professionals, and as many enthusiastic volunteers as possible. These are the basic fundamentals that will ensure the success of the mill. We are now completely convinced that the administrative success of the McLean Mill and the Alberni Pacific Railway ultimately depends on equal and respectful participation of the City of Port Alberni, the MMS, and the Industrial Heritage Society. All three groups have to cooperatively and actively support each other and fully utilize everyone's valuable talents and professional skills. We are totally convinced that the mill can be successful as long as there is an eager and noticeable willingness by all three parties to commit to its success. We recently determined that it is virtually impossible for volunteers to operate the McLean Mill because of the ever-increasing regulatory policies from many provincial and federal agencies, the overwhelming administrative responsibilities of operating the mill, and more so, the train, all coupled with the minimal budget. It's impossible. As talented and dedicated as any volunteers may be, such as the present-day McLean Mill Society, it is clearly unfair for any volunteers to even attempt to fully operate the McLean Mill and the train. We are convinced the city has to get more involved with the mill. How involved, we're unsure, but hopefully that will be determined relatively soon by all three parties. And the future, this is easy. In the past, the phenomenal number of talented Industrial Heritage Society volunteers have successfully operated a tourist railway and willingly assisted with almost every aspect of the operation of the McLean Mill, including the world-famous steam logging demonstration at the back of the mill. And that's a real show. People specifically come to see just that, is the logging demonstration. The Industrial Heritage Society is more than willing to continue our remarkable record of supporting the mill, as long as there's obvious evidence that all three parties are fully committed to the success of the mill and the train. This tripartite agreement, whether it's official or unofficial, it doesn't really matter, is critical to the mill's success. Without full participation from each party, it will be extremely difficult to operate, let alone expand, this world-class tourist attraction. So, our plans this year and into the future for the city's industrial heritage artifacts is no different than the last 39 years. Our volunteers are more than willing to continue restoring Port Alberni's heritage equipment and operating trains, preferably steam, to the McLean Mill. Our future plans for the McLean Mill are no different than the last 18 years. Volunteers from our society have spent an inordinate amount of time volunteering their talents to maintain and improve the McLean Mill. We will, in whatever way is practical and reasonable, continue our efforts at the McLean Mill. We are fully committed to working with our partners, the MMS and the City of Port Alberni, to help create a high-quality tourist attraction at the McLean Mill. Again, I could go on and on. I've been right from the start. This is my 33rd year with the Industrial Heritage Society, and that's, again, it'll be another 33 if I can do it. But I'd like to conclude with a fact to ponder. In 1989, Parks Canada granted the City of Port Alberni the privilege of operating a National Historic Site at the McLean Mill. Most of us then, and hopefully still do, realize that it is truly that. It's a privilege. As a city, it is our obligation to continue to commit to fulfilling this privilege. I'll start all over. Here we go. As a city, it is our obligation to continue to commit to fulfilling that privilege, and it's a privilege this community should not squander. Thank you.
Thank you
And
very much.
I'll stay for questions.
Council, are there any questions?
Come on, I'll take the question.
Councillor Solda?
It's not a question. I'm just not going to ask questions right now. I just want to hear everybody's report and take in the information. And so there will probably be questions after. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Sure.
Thank you. And thanks for your presentation, and thanks again to all of the volunteers. Those are the only two delegations that are on our agenda, but if council's okay with it, I'm going to welcome up 2 more parties just to give brief presentations before we take public input. That's the Steam Donkey people specifically, as we know that this is a large part of the site also. And then as well, I'd love to hear from Dr. Martin if possible, if he's interested. He looks amenable to it. So I'll ask David Hooper and Jack James to come up first.
Madam Mayor, councillors, my name is David Hooper, 2926 12th Avenue. I'm speaking on behalf of Jack James and the old-time steam logging demonstrations at the McLean Mill. We are 15 volunteers, plus or minus, and extras, mostly retired loggers who have been doing old-time logging demonstrations for the visitors to the McLean Mill using the steam donkey. JJ logging is unique in the whole world. It's only in Port Alberni that one can see a steam-powered high-lead logging operation with a wooden spar tree. And steam is what powered the forest industry on the whole west coast of North America in the first half of the last century, when the McLean Mill was operating. Jack James started the old-time logging project 11 years ago, when he said, "Visitors come to see the steam sawmill, but they don't see how the McLeans got the logs for the mill. Let's fix up the donkey." That summer, we built a new sled. The next year, 2009, Jack said, "Steam donkey should have a spar tree so visitors can see how the donkey logs." Using his contacts from his logging days, Jack got Aaron Toms to climb, top, and rig a second growth fir tree that was standing right beside the donkey. That summer, we fired up the donkey and there was steam logging for the first time in 50 years in the Alberni Valley. In 2010, we added the heel boom, and now there was steam sawmilling and steam logging at the National Historic Site. For the next 6 years, the logging crew did twice weekly demonstrations for the tourists, averaging about 20 shows a year. We also did demonstrations for school children at the National Forestry Day event and for the ADSS forestry classes. For the past 3 years, we have done command performances for forestry tour groups out of Sweden. They say that they come to Port Alberni specifically so that they can see the steam logging. They appreciate what we do, and there's quite a connection in the logging between Sweden and all the Swede immigrants who came here in the last century on the whole west coast. The last 2 years we've been doing 1 show a week. This year we did 12 shows until the mill site was closed in early September. This summer we entertained and educated. We do both. 720 visitors about this significant aspect of the heritage of the Alberni Valley. We were also the only history-based activity taking place on the mill site in 2018. We cooperated tightly with the Forest Service and the Wildfire Branch to be able to operate last summer, and we follow a stringent safety plan. For 2019, we remain willing to do old-time steam logging demonstrations a day a week, and we're willing to cooperate with whomever ends up operating the site. We thank you for hearing us out.
Thank you very much. Councillor, are there any questions? Oh, one question, Councillor Paulson.
Mr. Hooper, just sitting here musing back into history and stuff, but would you like to comment on the presence that we had at Expo 86, and we sent steam to Expo and in our exposure to the world? I know it's going back a ways, but I do remember that.
Really? I'm much
I was
too
only
young for
about
that.
4 years old then, but
Something like that.
I was not involved with the IHS at the time, although I went over to Expo to see it. And yeah, that was a high point in the whole 35 years that the IHS has existed. That was the big time, and it's something that we hark back to fondly. but it ain't over yet.
Thank you very much. Okay, and lastly, come on up, Dr. Jamie Morton.
So, I haven't prepared a talk, but a little bit of background. So what I was asked to do was to put together a bit of background information in support of what you've heard from the MMS and the IHS. And part of it gets into what Councillor Paulson was just asking about, actually. I'm a simple historian, right? So I tend to think of things in terms of historical causality and why things happen the way they do. What happened here is really interesting because the forest industry was kind of slowing down. There were people at the Alberni Valley Museum, led by John Mitchell, later by Jean McIntosh, and with support from political forces, city managers, etc., who started looking at how important that heritage was to the community. It's a two-piece thing. I'm going to keep on coming back to the idea of preservation and presentation. That was what the CAO alluded to in respect of the agreement with Canada. The idea is that McLean Mill is supposed to be preserved and presented to the public. If you don't have both parts of that, it's kind of meaningless. The objects were being decommissioned in terms of industry. They were being saved through the actions of the Alberni Valley Museum and the volunteers. That's why the IHS did form up. The rail equipment, the steam donkey, etc. One of the big drivers of that was Expo 86 and the whole Steam Expo exercise. It's also when the Harbour Quay development was occurring, and everybody was looking for switching from an industrial into a post-industrial economy more. The cultural heritage of the region, in particular the forest industry, drove that. That's why McLean Mill eventually became a target for what Parks Canada called their systems plan. They were looking for unrepresented or underrepresented aspects that were of national historic significance. West Coast forest industry was one of those. The reason that site was chosen is that it not only had a steam sawmill, but it had the associated village or community, the labor force that was working there. It also had logging. It also had transportation and the link to the rail system. So it was seen as kind of a perfect microcosm of what the forest industry had been like in its boom years up until the 1970s. That's why it all came to pass kind of the way it did. Now, the commemoration has already been alluded to in 1989. That was a big deal, confirming McLean Mill as a National Historic Site. And it was chosen over a number of other sites that were put forward, a lot of sucking of teeth about the whole thing. It was a big process, but it did have that designation. Now, what they were doing also at that time is, this is going to sound familiar, is they were trying to look for economies in terms of how you operated these commemorated sites. I know, we'll have a society, we'll have a local community, we'll have somebody else run it. It's a recognized National Historic Site. A lot of people I know ask, why don't the feds put more money into it? Because it's a National Historic Site. It wasn't what they were trying to do then. They were looking at third-party operations. And the idea, and again, the CAO alluded to this earlier, of commemorative integrity was sort of the keynote behind this whole thing. In other words, you have this statement of what are the key symbolic, strategic elements of the site that carry the messages. Those need to be preserved at any cost, basically. That's kind of the key thing in the site. Level 1 resources are what they used to be referred to as. In the case of McLean Mill, that's about 35 buildings, structures. It's the landscape itself, including things like the boneyards and that, which are part of the historic message. It's the mill pond. It's the some 25 trucks and other large machines that have McLean provenance that tell that story. So they're the things that are seen as really critical. One of the devices that was used, so in the 1990s, they developed a management plan that the CAO also alluded to. A couple of versions of that were brought out. There was an initial one in 92, one in 93, the final one in 96 that informed the deal with Canada. But they were also presented with different options about how do you preserve and present this. One of the options was called Preserved Sawmill Village. And that was kind of a static one. That was just, you keep things from falling down, you use passive interpretation, you have a visitor center, you have ways that you tell the story that way. So you preserve the site as it was found, basically, and tell people the story, run people through. The second one was the focus more on the history of the whole BC forest industry. So it would have the same, preserve the thing, but run limited operations of machines, demos, things like the steam donkey demonstration would be the sort of thing that would be included in that one. It was, both of these were lower cost initiatives. The first one I think was 3 point some odd million. The second one was 5.6 million. The third one, which is the one that was chosen, was a full-on working historic sawmill village. That was a $7.4 million initiative initially. And it was projected also, so just to give you an idea, we've heard Kevin talk about the volunteers and what an important part they've played. Absolutely true. But when they were originally planning this, that option was supposed to have a $500,000 annual payroll in $93 and 15 people working. It was supposed to have a 7,000-foot curatorial center built at the site to house the machines, restore the machines, et cetera, et cetera. It was the Cadillac version, in as many words. And these all work equal, well, maybe not equally well, but they all work to preserve the commemorative integrity. But people were very ambitious about what they wanted to see done. So this is going to sound familiar too. The reason why they chose option 3 is because it was the only one that offered the generation of significant revenue, right? Because it was going to be the full offer, they were projecting that 116,000 people would visit the first year, 143,000, 145,000 within 5 years. It would generate $900,000, and again, this is all $1993 in revenue. And of course, that would pay the payroll, and that would take care of the buildings, and everything would just be great. That was why that was the decision that was made for. There were good reasons for doing it. They were economic reasons. It was revenue generation. It was self-sustainability. All the things we're still talking about today. We all know it didn't quite work that way. The maximum visitation was about 15,000 in 2007, 2009. And the revenues never approached that kind of level. There's still the same obligation to maintain this large restored site as per the agreement that the CAO alluded to earlier, but not the revenue, not the staff, not the people to do this. The efforts were made again to find new models. This is why in 2012 it was farmed out as a contract, a fee for service to the IHS directly. Prior to that, it would be more collaborative between the AV Museum and the city and the IHS and managers at the mill itself. So there have been attempts to make it pay for itself. The MMS was another effort to find a new way of generating revenue. And I've got a just editorial comment. I really endorse the idea of events and special things going on and one-time offers. Make things a big deal, but do them in a way that doesn't impact the historic site and the commemorative integrity of the site. That is the way that you can generate the most money. Sheena alluded before to the Jeepers Creepers and the other events, the weddings and so forth. Those are things that do work as a revenue generating source in a big, big way. So that's the commemorative integrity piece kind of in a nutshell. The one other thing, this is one of my own hobby horses, is the separation of the APR and the McLean Mill operation. As originally envisioned, the APR wasn't part of that. As Kevin said, it kind of growed out of the whole Steam Expo thing. The two-spot was restored. It was chugging up and down on the harbor front. It was a popular small tourist railway. Once McLean Mill became kind of the magnet for development, for lots of money, for lots of excitement in the community, it was totally logical to link that to the railway. And hey, we can get the number 7 that came in from Ladysmith. Let's restore that. That would be a good engine to use on that run. They did do the business case projections and things in 2000. It looked like this would give a big kickstart. The initial results in terms of visitation weren't anything like were envisioned in the management plan. But maybe if we put in a steam railway, that'll boost it. There's a real synergy there. Let's do that. And ever since then, since 2001, the two have been treated as a unit. One of the things I want to make really clear is that the commemorative integrity statement and the status as a National Historic Site does not include the APR. It's strictly the mill itself, and in particular, it's the historic zone that was defined at the mill is sort of the key to maintaining the commemorative integrity of the site. The obligation that the city has legally with the Government of Canada is to maintain the commemorative integrity of that site as the third-party operator of a National Historic Site. The railway is something apart from that. It's a heritage attraction, if you will. It's something that can, in my opinion, has more scope probably for revenue generation. Trains are an easy sell. People get trains. People like to ride on trains. It's something attractive. Whether it needs to be treated as the same package, personally, I think not. So it's one of those things that does need to be investigated a little bit relative to what these things do for the community, relative to what the legal obligation is of the City of Port Alberni. Again, I'm going to take one small step back. I hope I'm not at my 10 minutes.
That's okay.
The sort of reason for preserving things, for all this historic stuff, and I've got to say, the industrial collection of the Alberni Valley Museum / City of Port Alberni is huge. It's 6 locomotives, as Kevin alluded to. It's about 20 rail cars and machines. It's the 25 or 30 McLean Mill objects. It's about 20 or 25 large trucks, Hayes trucks in particular. And these are all taken care of by the volunteers of the IHS. The IHS's original purpose in their constitution was to restore, operate, and present objects owned by the City of Port Alberni. Hence the Industrial Heritage Center, hence the Roundhouse. These are facilities that the city has turned over, made available for the IHS to preserve the city's own objects. So why do you preserve these things? So why do we have all this stuff? 2 reasons. Reason 1, Dan's smiling because he's heard all this before. The reason 1 is that it's the identity of the community. The forest industry and industry is kind of a key part of the story here. So kids need to know, like David was talking about with the demos out at the Steam Donkey. People see how the forest industry worked, what their fathers, grandfathers might have done in their working lives. So it's really important to maintain the character of the community, and we all know that authenticity is one of the key things that's required to attract people to community. That sense of special identity is really important. Part 2 builds on that. It's cultural tourism, and heritage cultural tourism is a big deal now. We all know that. For boomers, for people that do travel, looking for those quote-unquote authentic experiences, real things, people that actually worked in the day, all those things that we can offer with a collection like that. So the 2-part thing is maintaining the identity of the community and creating an offer that is attractive and financially viable to, again, that same thing that we were looking at in the 1980s, trying to switch from an industrial economy into a more post-industrial tourism, culture-based economy. It's really a key part of it. I sound like I'm ranting now, so I'll stop. Any questions?
Thank you. Council, are there questions? Councillor Paulson?
Just later in your talk there, you talked about our collection or our artifacts, and we don't have to answer this today, but maybe we could come back with a general overall view. But with regards to object inventory, is our inventory too large is it too small, or is it where we want it to be? No, and what I'm saying is
Goldilocks.
yeah, but you know, how many trucks do we need in our collection that may be exactly the same model, but we take on to preserve them?
It's a really good question.
And that's a cost
Yep, it is.
consideration.
It is definitely. That's one of the things that usually, and that was why Dan was smiling about this, we sort of beat ourselves up on the Heritage Commission developing collections policy for the Alberni Valley Museum collection, which includes this industrial collection. It does need to be looked at. And again, without telling the story, so preserving, that has a cost implication, obviously. How effective a story do they tell? How do you focus it? At the museum, for instance, the focus now is just strictly on objects that have provenance or history related to the region, related to the Alberni Valley. That could be done with respect to the truck collection, for example. What does have direct local significance, did play a part, or is it something that's really representative of a particular aspect of the industry that we need to tell, something that we need to talk about? I'm going to get back to a bigger question with this too, is that we did formerly have a fairly effective heritage network that included the mill and the train and the maritime heritage folks and the museum and anybody else that was involved in the heritage biz. And it would be really good to look at that globally for the region, sort of what are all the organizations doing, and trying to make it work as complementary units. So the IHS, just because of the nature of who they are, has been developing their own collection. So they got about 15 trucks now. There's been a couple of occasions when I was working for the museum when I said, no, I don't want that thing. So they said, oh, well, we'll take it then. We've got room. Hard to say no. But it does, you're absolutely right. It creates an issue. The larger the collection gets, and maintaining it, just think about a fleet of 40 contemporary trucks, running a bus fleet or a trucking fleet or something. When you start to get things that are 60, 80, 100 years old, it gets complicated even more. But at the same time, they're very cool and they're very attractive to people. Again, that identity and marketing piece. Long answer to short question.
Thank you. Councillor Solda.
I wasn't going to ask a question, but I think this one is important to ask. First of all, men and their toys. My husband would be in there like a dirty shirt. I have to throw things away when he's not around. Anyways, my question is, who made the projections of how many people at the beginning would come to the mill? Was it the government that made the projections prior to choosing A, B, and C?
It was a community consultative process. So it was a combination of local politicians, expertise coming from outside, from the province and from the feds, local politicians, local citizens. There's a long list in the management plan of who was consulted about that.
Okay, so the government, the feds had nothing to do with it or anything like this?
Oh, they had an influence, but they didn't ram it down anybody's throat.
Okay.
But a couple of things did modify with that. One of the things, option 2 was going to be presenting different time periods. Option 3 originally wasn't, but that was one of the modifications they made when they actually decided to implement it in that direction. So it was a collaborative exercise. It wasn't any one person. And again, remember, there was a lot of enthusiasm in the community for preserving it at that time. And it was a time when all this stuff was coming in a big way, was very available. There was also, of course, the donation of the site from McMillan Blodell. And that was just kind of the Kickstarter. I don't know if all of you are familiar with the story originally. If you go out there now and look at the sawmill building, you'll see all these little metal tags with numbers on them. One of the plans earlier had been to disassemble the sawmill and move it down to Victoria Quay and rebuild it there as an attractive tourist site right on the highway. You capture everybody that way, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, I know Muriel McLean from McLean's Mill. She used to laugh at what was happening out there, like why would people be interested?
Yeah.
But the other thing too I have is regarding the need to look at our collection. I agree we should look at our collection and see how much do we need and how much for affordability and that. And I know that's been asked many times by many different councils, and I think that's something that should be on our list to take a look at. And just to touch, if we decided, and I've always been told how, but maybe the public still needs to hear it. If we decided to take away McLean's Mill and just make it, do we have to pay back just to make it like you just walk in and take a look?
I
How
have
does
no
it?
idea.
You don't know how the rest of that contract works. Maybe
No,
our CEO.
I don't think
explain
anybody's
that.
ever really rescinded on one of those, so
No.
it'd be an experiment.
Well, $2.2 million, you were saying, and maybe that's a question that can come back as an answer to us.
Yeah, it would have to be checked.
Yep.
Parks Canada is not the institution it was in the 1990s.
I was going to say that, yeah.
They
Times
cut
have
back
changed.
a lot in size and budget, and they've laid off a lot of the people that were involved on this side of things.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, they are still funding the cost-sharing program, and you heard Sheena allude to that before,
Yes.
that Director Thorpe and her group have applied for another cost-sharing grant to pay for repairs to the buildings out there. So there is, theoretically, there's more support available if it's strategically approached.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, madam.
Thank you. Councillor Corbeil.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. I'm not sure, Jamie, if you're the right person to ask this question to, but I just seen this report, that John Dam and Associates report that was just circulated to us recently. And what I found interesting is the dip tank where it sits now had been moved from the northwest corner. And of course, in the day, pentachlorophenols were used to preserve wood, and now we find that there's some contamination in the pond. Do you know if they actually ever did soil samples in the corner where the dip tank was originally?
I think there were some down there. I don't have access to that report. They did do an assessment in 1994 and then a post-remediation report. I can't remember the name of the firm. CAO, do you remember that? Envirotech. Yeah, out of North Van or Burnaby. So they did do some examination of that. Whether it would be the same as what would be done today. And it's one of the things, again, Kevin alluded before to regulatory regimes changing. It's really, really true. I acted for a while as the manager of the APR and finding out just what you need to conform with in terms of Technical Safety BC. It's much more rigorous. Likewise, environmental constraints, regulations are much more rigorous than they were when they were setting the site up in the early 1990s. So I don't have a good answer to that. I don't know whether there were samples specific to that previous dip tank location or not. I also don't know what chemicals were used in the 30s when they were actually there. The pentachlorophenol was in the 50s and 60s when the tank was moved up to its current location.
Okay. And just a comment, I think you alluded to it, and Kevin as well, the center, the old arena with all the trucks and trains and power saws and everything. I think that's a real gem that's very underutilized in this community. And I don't know if you'd like to make a comment, but I would think that
I will.
I'd love to see it a little bit more open to tourists.
Let's keep the comment reasonably brief because this is off our subject for today.
Promotion. Promotion is what's required, and predictability. And, I've bugged the IHS guys about that. They had 2 students based there last summer, so it was open, predictable hours. People knew if they came in, they would be able to get a tour, see the objects and things. That's what it really takes. And that was part of what I was alluding to before with the old heritage network idea, where you have a single point of entry. If somebody's interested in that kind of stuff, they know, hey, we go to the IHC these hours, this day, we'll see this kind of stuff. Just getting the word out there. People are so frustrated if they go to get a train ticket or see something and it's not there and they weren't notified of that in advance. It puts them off. They'll tell other people, oh, well, yeah, they say they've got this, but. So it's really spooling up the promotion of the heritage assets of the region, I think. Potential is enormous, as both these folks have said already, all three of these folks have said already, massive potential, and it still hasn't been fully realized. And a lot of it is just getting word out.
Thank you very much. Okay, Councillor Paulson.
I just have a quick question, and this is more for an educational part for me, but there are other historical sites in the province, and I guess probably where my confusion is are we on the right track with governance models? And places like Fort Steele and Barkerville come to mind, and I'd be interested to compare what we're doing to their governance models, their successes or non-successes. Are they financially viable? I mean, at the end of the day, what we're talking about here, and we just finished about an hour and a half ago a budget meeting.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, it comes down to money and affordability and what you can do and what you can't do. But I'm just wondering if we might be able to copy or have a look at some of the other governance models around Western Canada even.
There is information on that. Now, both the sites that you mentioned, Fort Steele and Barkerville, have been floundering recently. And they've both introduced new models. They're both provincially owned assets that are run by societies that have been set up to do that. And that's a fairly, it's not a radically different model to what exists here, where you've got a government-owned asset or set of assets that is being operated by a nonprofit society. It's a difficult sell, you know, unless you have a massive infusion of capital. So here's a success story: is Britannia Mines, because they had $10 million given to them as part of the 2010 Olympic initiative to have a cool site on the way out to Whistler. They did great. But it takes that kind of kickstart. Likewise, you know, it was analogous to what happened here in 1999, 97 to 99, when there was a big infusion of provincial and federal funding. It's just that the numbers never quite added up. Does that kind of, yeah.
Thank you. And I have one last question before we get to public input. On the topic of budget, and we had a comment from IHS earlier that, you know, if we're going to do this, we need to commit to it and fund it properly. In your capacity as the APR manager, and not for too long, but what is the right capacity of funding? Do you have an idea on that? I know you've put together somewhat of a budget. I'm not sure if it's available for us to look at.
Yeah, I did put together a rough budget predicated on, and this wasn't involving changing the model in any kind of essential way. So the budget I came up with, well, there's the revenue and expense projections. So between $300,000 and $400,000 a year, give or take, for the total operation. Of that, I was projecting, well, as you can see, anything between 102 and 192,000 coming from the city, depending on what the demands are in terms of track work and that. Just by way of comparison, and I looked at some of the information relating to the Kettle Valley Railway, another heritage railway in the province, which is successfully running as a nonprofit. Their annual budget is between $850,000 and $900,000 a year for their operation. They have up to 27 part-time staff, paid staff working for them. Much lower volunteer reliance in that case. So yeah, this is based on numbers that primarily numbers over the past 2 years from the MMS information, some coming from the earlier IHS regime, and predicated on what does need doing. The biggest fixed cost that came as a moderate surprise to me was just the cost of the track maintenance. The projection was 400 in the 10-year plan that the city has. Projection was replacing 400 ties a year. If you break that down with the number of ties that are in the operation, it's about a 66-year replacement cycle. I think that's way too long. So tried to shorten it down a little bit. So that's one of the reasons why the number's as high as it is. At the same time, it looks like the bridges aren't as tough as they looked like from one of the earlier studies. So I've left a lower number for the high years when bridges are being worked on. I've also included all that as operational funding rather than putting anything into capital funding, just so it's easily available on one page. So yeah,
Thank you very much.
rough estimates, Class D estimates.
Thank you. One final question before we go to the public.
Yeah. So my question is, your budget up there, does it include hydro and all that? Because I know the city was looking after that. What about insurance? Your insurance says 1,800, but would you piggyback onto the insurance?
That's one of, excuse me, one of the assumptions I didn't include in this was because the city has paid that insurance previously. So that would have to be tacked onto that, yeah.
And then there was a recommendation on accounting too, so, and major repairs. So that would probably come back to the city, so that budget would actually inflate a little.
No, probably not. The locomotive repair and maintenance line I've got there has a number for what it would take to get the RS3 into running condition this year, the Alco, and what it would cost to get the number 7 Baldwin into condition for running for next year. So again, I've just kind of included that in the operational numbers.
So Madam Mayor, I will leave the weeds alone and talk more when it comes to the budget with McLean's Mill. So I just wanted to bring that forward.
Yeah.
Thank
And
you.
to clarify, this is just for APR. This is not the operation of McLean Mill site. This is railroad related.
Yeah, one of the points of discussion would be how did it look to operate the APR as a standalone, as a separate entity? Because the way it's worked in the past, the budget's always been rolled into the McLean Mill budget. And again, this is not a huge budget. It's fairly conservative, but it's probably what it would cost to run a sustainable heritage railway based on what I've heard from Technical Safety BC and what the requirements are now.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Okay.
Thanks, Madam Mayor.
And so thank you to the public for waiting while we get all of the presentations covered. So I'd like to open it up to members of the public to speak, and I'm just going to remind people that we would like everyone to keep their comments to 2 minutes so that we can allow as many people as possible to speak. Who would like to come up first? Ellie, come on up. And just a reminder to people, when you do come to the front, please state your name and address for the record.
Sure. My name is Ellie Hadley. I'm 2434 14th Avenue. I'm the office manager out at McLean Mill currently. I just thought it would be useful for everyone to hear some of the tourist feedback. Part of my job involves working with the public a lot and hearing what they have to say. So it seems that most of our tourists come from mainland, Alberta, US, and actually Europe and Asia now as well. And interesting to note that a high number of them actually preferred having their own transport. They thought the train was wonderful, but often found it too expensive, or with young children, it was difficult timing-wise. So that's something to consider as well. And it's also good to know that a lot of the trains that we run in 2018 were... Where's my notes here? We're less than half full or only just had enough people to make the train viable. The days that those train seats were sold more of was when we had programming like the Steam Donkey, Theme Thursdays, that proved very popular as well. And of course, events like the seasonal events, weddings, things like that proved very popular with the guests as well. And that's all I had.
Thank you very much. Okay. Who's next? I can't imagine all of you came to not speak. Mr. Del Rio.
Jim Del Rio, 2871 First Avenue. I have to commend all you people for what you've done with the mill. Obviously, I'm not really in favor of it as a running mill. I'm in favor of it as a static mill, places for events. I've had a lot to do with antiques over the years. I've had my own antique business for about 15 years, so I know what it's like to deal with old stuff. And unfortunately, when I look around this room, we're old. You know, and my biggest concern is,
I'm young.
my biggest concern is if we keep something like this running, who's going to run it after you guys are gone? You know, I deal with a lot of youth. We have a fairly youthful council, except for a couple of them. Hey, I just turned into an antique, so on Saturday. You know, and I find I deal with a lot of youth, and unfortunately, they're more interested in their iPhones than they are in a mill. And that's what I think, as a group of people, you have to keep that in mind. Like, yes, I would love to see the mill. I like the antiques. You know, I love all that stuff. That's me, and that's you. The young people, my daughter had a, what did she call it? It wasn't an antique store. It was, oh, I can't remember the name. Some kind of furniture. Yeah, 1970. That's what sells. That's what sells to people is 1970, 1980 stuff. They don't care about a dresser that came from 1930, and that's what I'm trying to, that's the biggest thing with me is where do you draw the line? As a council, you know, when I hear, like I heard on the news today, to redo buildings. Now, I don't know what it's like in BC. I haven't been here long enough or been involved in the heritage, but in Alberta, if you have a heritage site and you want to fix it, the glass has to be the exact same glass that's in there. The wood has to be the exact same wood. It'd be great to put a tin roof on those buildings to protect them. You can't do it. It's very expensive. But as a static, I think it should be, and have a couple of employees or, you know, some summer students out there to guide people, have those little plaques like they have down at Victoria Quay that explain how it worked, you know, because I just don't think there's people to go on to, unfortunately, they're just not interested. They want to look at their iPhone. They don't even go to movie theaters anymore. They watch it on a little screen like this. That's all I have to say about it. No suggestions, but, and the other thing I would like to know too, one thing I did want to know, because since I got to this town, and I always get involved in any town I'm in, I've heard nothing but people complaining about the amount of money that's gone into that mill, but there's no accountability for it. Is there books that show from day one where all that money went? Detailed books? I don't know. But a lot of people, that's what they ask, you know, because I talk to a lot of people. And so I hear that there's been a lot of money, and I'm not saying anybody stole it or not, but
I'm realizing you're over your 2 minutes.
Okay, I'm out of here.
Thank you, Jim. The next person up was Rochelle. Come on up, Rochelle.
Hello, Madam Mayor, City Council. My name is Rochelle Collette. I am currently the events coordinator for McLean Mill. I was brought on in May of 2017 as the executive assistant. However, after summer, we realized that events were an overwhelming workload for an assistant. So my role then morphed into events manager. So Sheena kind of quickly mentioned that we have a number of weddings booked for 2019. That number is actually 13 with a few in the works, but we do expect to be 100% sold out for this summer. I'm also booking weddings into 2020, and we have about 3 confirmed and about 5 in the works, so I do expect 2020 to sell out quickly as well. Jeepers Creepers, which has been brought up a number of times, that event I planned initially in 2017. That was our debut Jeepers Creepers, and as you've all heard, it went exceptionally well. 2018, we were able to grow it, and 2019, I expect to continually grow it as well. So I just wanted to shed a little bit of light on what the events are doing for the mill. They have been overwhelmingly successful, and I look forward to continuing the events into the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Roth?
Hi, my name's Susan Roth, and I'm not a city resident. I live out by McLean's Mill. I'm just going to read a few excerpts out of a letter that I left with all of you. I've reviewed the most recent report about the contamination problems at McLean Mill and think the city needs to undertake further assessments as recommended by Dave Clough, the biologist, and Terra West Environmental Services, both authors of the report. Beaver Creek, Beaufort Range, Cherry Creek residents' best interest should be considered, as all three areas are in close proximity of McLean Mill. From a legal standpoint, when contaminated water was released from the mill pond this past year, the problem became a rural problem, and the moment it left the property's boundary, it became our problem. That's under Environmental Management Act. The City of Port Alberni did not include a very important part of Terra West recommendations in their direction to the consultants. The biologist and agrologist also recommended assessment of the wider mill property and historical uses to attempt to identify the source and contaminants concurrently identified in the pond. So there's more than just the mill pond. There's contaminants that could be all over the mill. We don't know for sure. Obviously, something's seriously wrong. Current test results in Terra West report show that the sediment in and around the pond contain chromium, mercury, arsenic, polychlorinated dioxins and furans, and more. Research shows that polychlorinated dioxins and furans are extremely toxic, even at very low concentrations. The source needs to be located and immediately addressed. The days following the release of the contaminated water from the pond, I took a walk around the mill site. I saw reddish-brown water being pumped from the mill pond into a stream flowing in the direction of my property in Beaver Creek. Who's to say that the chemicals used in the dip tank haven't migrated into the pond? And if so, perhaps the chemicals have gone in other directions as well. I live downstream from McLean Mill. A small tributary from the creek from McLean Mill runs through my property. I care. I know a young family that lives close to McLean Mill that uses well water in their everyday lives. They drink it. What about the groundwater? Has it ever been looked at? I've read all the reports and I haven't seen anything where the groundwater's been looked at. It's not fair to put those people or me or anyone at a risk. People that live close to and downstream from McLean Mill need reassurance that everything possible has been done to ensure contaminants at the mill site are either removed or properly contained. It's about due diligence. And I think we need to make sure that due diligence has been conducted. So basically, I'm asking you to recommend in your direction to the consultant to look at everything. Everything that they recommended, that's what we should be looking at. I know it's a lot of money, but I'm quite sure that all of the regional directors in the ACRD would help the city in getting the funding necessary to remediate and to resolve the problems. Thank you. And if anybody has any questions from me?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Who would like to come up next? Mr. McRae.
I'm not going to waste my time going up 2 minutes. I can't believe you only give me 2 minutes.
That's too quick for you, I know. You're being asked to come to the front. So, because we are live streaming, we want to make sure people can hear you. So thank you.
Okay, just a few comments. So that was kind of I started as a mayor in 2000. I was mayor for 4 terms. So that was one of the biggest items we had when we found out how much we had to give to the McLean's Mill Society. I think it was $800,000 we were giving to start off with. And then we cut it down from there. But we kept the organization, which was really great. I'm also on the board for the Island Corridor Foundation. I've been on there from the word go, from the word beginning. And liabilities, you want to see liabilities. You should be on the Island Corridor world, especially now. And so we have a new CEO, so we're looking at a whole new structure of the Island Corridor Foundation. The line from here to Nanaimo, it's probably going to come down to the road. That we'll probably be doing all the work on that line. There's no doubt about that. And so that'd be a little bit of money would be going back into the pocket here. So we're looking at that. But that's one of the things that we're looking at in the rail line down the road. You're looking down the road and we're all gone. People coming to this area, they're going to come here by rail. They're going to come here by passenger train. They want to see something. And one of the things they'll probably want to see is McLean Mill. You have to be careful of the things that you get rid of. One of the things we had, I remember sitting on a logging truck down here at the old curling rink when they wanted to get rid of that because they wanted to get the money for it and sell it. It's still there today. That's where all our heritage equipment is. You look at the hospital. I wasn't I was on board because I was president of labor, and we had a lot of say in this community. I was with Mrs. Dyson and Mr. Trumper to get us the new hospital. And so one of the first things they wanted to do after they had built the new hospital was rip down the old one where the seniors' residences, which is now Abbotsfield. I think that was a pretty good decision that we made. Councillor Solder was on council, Councillor Washington, Councillor Brett was on council. We made a pretty good decision there. That's a pretty good thing. Another one was Glenwood Centre. We were going to get rid of Glenwood Centre. Never forget standing there, and I seen half the guys I worked with in the pulp mill in the front row all yelling at me. How come you're getting rid of Glenwood Center? It's a good thing. We kept that, so it's good. So that's something you have to remember. You know, and you have to have some positive things, how we can move ahead with this. And one of the things is you have to get the federal government to put some money into it. I even got Coulson to hijack the minister responsible for the federal government for parks. They come to McLean's Mill and give them a tour. And his thing was, talk to the people in Long Beach. They're the people who make the decision to support Alberni. We never got anywhere. But maybe you can do something now. And there's other things that you can look at. I just came back from the Truck Loggers Convention. And looking at the Truck Loggers Convention, they give $85,000 to our competition in Duncan for the Forestry Museum. Timber West and the big forest companies, I think, give something like $300,000 to them. We have to get our politicians out, and I will help you that way if I can. We have to get some money from somebody else. I know it's a tough decision, it's budget time, the toughest decision you ever made. But remember, if you make the decision to get rid of McLean's Mill, it'll never come back again. And I'm always thinking, I was McLean's paper boy at one time. He was quite a politician. Quite a politician. His picture's up here. He's probably listening to us. That's all. Thank you.
You get extra time because you're a freeman of the city. Mr. Collette next.
Thank you very much. Bill Collette, and I'm CEO of the Chamber of Commerce, and I was the initial president of the McLean Mill Society. I wanted to really echo what Ken McRae just said. We cannot even consider getting rid of McLean Mill. It is something we have, and we've got to always realize that. There's a quote that I copied today, and this came from Parks Canada. It's just a few words. And it says, places of profound importance to Canada. And what it's referring to is National Historic Sites. And we have to look at that with McLean Mill. It has profound importance to Canada. When I look at the visitor center, people come in there, they're looking for things to do. They want to go places. They want to see our history. And whether they want to see the JJ logging show or just walk through the site, that's what they're here to do, and we've got to continue with that and support it. I'd also like to acknowledge the work that was done. Many of the people speaking here earlier today, Kevin and Sheena and the girls working at the mill and others, Jamie, of course. What we started in 2017 under this McLean Mill Society was really quite successful. And I hope that council realizes that we've made some good steps there. Just a lot of little things, but you put them together, like the deck outside the main room. People are always sitting on there. The cleanup of the main hall there, and the development of the kitchen, and the opportunity that we can now run events and major events. Nothing mentioned here today so far about a big event held last June, but it brought 125 people out of Qualicum Beach, each paying $125 to go out there and enjoy the environment. Music, top-level food. They went out by train, and then they came back the next day and booked it for this year. That's incredible. They drove back the next day to thank the staff and the operations there. So please, council, these are tough decisions you have to make. But the tough ones are the hard ones and often the right ones. And hopefully you make the right decision to stay with the course and keep operating this McLean Mill. Thank you.
Thank you. Come on up.
Hi, I'm, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, okay. I'm Sharon Adams. I'm your neighbor, 900 feet or something downstream from McLean's Mill. This is out of my element. I'd much rather be in my barn, but I have to talk. 2016, I started to have more problems, and I started to look into what was causing my problems with my animals and myself. And I found out that actually for 10 years prior, all these problems that I was seeing could all be identified as chemical poisoning. So I started to wonder, well, you know, is it on the farm? Well, I finally go down to the creek and I start looking at the creek. And I tried to get government help, and nobody will come to my farm. So then I see Sheena Faulkner doing water tests. So I call and I say, look, there's a problem with this creek. Can you come and help me out here? And yes, she came and she did tests. But she came on a day when we're under flood watch. And I get these results back and it's not showing anything. And I'm going, well, you know, I don't understand chemicals. So I start to study it and I start to talk to toxicologists. And they said, well, those tests are no good. You can't have 3 inches of rain. And besides PCBs, you won't find in water. You have to screen it. And of course, she never did do dioxin testing, so we don't know. So I continue to try to get government help. Nobody helps. We go see Tim Ply at City Hall with all these rocks that are down there from up at the pond. Nobody comes. Not one government person came out to help me. And I got horror stories from 10 years. I sell food to people. I was left there trying to figure out what to do. You couldn't even, in 2016, I could not even have a shower. The fumes from the heat the hot water I'd pass out. Nobody would help. Go to the health lady. No help. No, and that's another story. Now, you found TCDD in that pond. That is something you don't mess around with. Are you going to be doing further testing? You know, they can trace it. They told me they can come, they can find it, they can trace it, they can find the source. You know, I don't get it. How can this happen? How come for 20 years I'm thinking it's Parks Canada up there. I got a thing saying in 1996 it's endorsed by Environment Canada. I never thought about that place. Never entered my mind. But you don't get a horse, a dog, and myself having our thyroid shut down within a year and a half of each other. That is something in the water. That's something on the farm. I don't know. All I know is I need some help, and nobody will help me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Adams, come on up.
Hello. First, I'll tell you I'm not a public speaker, and I'll say that I give credit to all the people that have worked as volunteers and worked hard on this. But I'm going to say I live next door to this place now for 28 years. And I'd like to bring up first, as far as the city, I have never in my entire life, and I have been regulated my entire life in the car industry, how to treat people and how to do business. And I'm going to start off with, my wife is exactly right. And I don't think this city or any other city has enough money to take care of the contamination at that site. But to start off, I'd like to bring up the septic system to show the people of this town exactly what goes on. The most disgusting, November 2016, Mr. Ply writes me and he says, do we need to consider upgrades and changes to support a commercial kitchen? He says, we don't believe that an upgrade is required, but we'll inquire with health authority for when they put in the kitchen. So, Alex Dyer, hi John, as discussed, we issued a building permit to the city. The city provided a letter from a registered on-site wastewater practitioner confirming that the septic system meets the requirements for field size and the banquet facility. This is 2017. A letter from the ATSSB, which is the people that license the people to inspect sewer systems. It says right here, since the sewage system had been inspected by a ROWP that was hired by the city, not certified, in the inspector category, the board has decided that that was not a proper inspection because it wasn't done by a licensed proper person hired by the city. So a letter was sent to the city of Port Alberni and to the health department, your environmental health department. Fine and dandy. We're now July 2018, ascertained by my work that he was not licensed or qualified. 2018 October, Dr. Paul Hasselback. A letter from him. I have reviewed the file with Ms. Rubel, who is your local health. We will look at this matter and jointly formulate a plan of next steps with the city. Great. Let's give them some more time, more crap. Then we get, hello John, from Tim Ply, and this is October 18th. Let's see when I started. November 2016. Do you need a septic system or anything for this kitchen or McLean's Mill? 2016. October 18th. October 18th. Mr. Ply writes me a letter back. Mr. Adams, we have been, let's read it exactly. The city will have the sewerage at the systems at McLean's Mill inspected by a qualified third party based on a recommendation from Vancouver Island Health Authority, and it will be undertaken during the first half of 2019. So there you go. More bogus paperwork to do with the sewer at McLean's Mill, and then they have a kitchen that they're running, and then they put in a campground. And when it comes down to the contamination, your answer, Mr. Corbeil, is at no time ever did EnviroChem do a test where we now find out a week ago that the original dip tank was. At no time did they go near that area, period. And this place, as far as I'm concerned, is a toxic waste dump. We're the only one in the world that has a sawmill that is run. And you know why? If you read other countries, nobody's stupid enough to try and spend money to clean it up. And when you go along with other governments, they continue to cover up for McLean's Mill, for the city. Now, if I want a septic, I go by the rules. And when the city is out in my district, they will go by the rules. Anyway, I am fed up with you guys as far as I'm concerned. If you don't fix the problem, you'll be in court. And if you can't follow the rules, don't be in the neighborhood.
Thank you, Mr. Adams.
You're welcome.
I'm going to call up next. I'm going to call up our manager of communications, and I think we have some comments from online.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Council. So yes, I wanted to bring forward a number of comments that were provided through our Let's Connect platform. Some of them we can attribute to individuals, others we just have their username. So the first being from the Owl's Path Tourism. They write in to say, we've been talking about the McLean Mill and the amazing opportunities that a tourism partnership would create. With First Nations and the historical site, we would be able to bring them, I think being tourists, locally. We have from Ron Merck, I'm not in favor of the city supporting McLean's Mill. It's nice, all right, and in a beautiful place, yes. I have been there, but it's not the city's, it should not be city sponsored. from someone by the username Stop Bleeding Cash. I'm totally against spending another dollar on that pile of rust. We need to be spending the money on paving our streets and beautifying our city. From A. Hoskin, my family loves the train and the mill. I really hope you vote to keep it going. It's fun for the kids and adults alike. It's good for tourism as well. From our friend at Westport, McLean's is not located in the city of Port Alberni. It makes no sense for its taxpayers to continue to fund this. Focus on beautifying the entrance to Port Alberni and our waterfront. We deserve that. And from Jay Finley, let's stop funding a monument to pollution and reckless environmental degradation. Imagine what $20,000 could have supported instead, such as hiking trails, community gardens, and reforestation. And then finally, we have from Emily, who just submitted a few minutes ago. So regardless of previous decisions made and money spent, the city has a responsibility to address the historic pollution that happened at this historic site. To cut and run now isn't a 21st century way to look forward.
Thank you.
Any questions? Okay.
No, that's great. Thank you very much. Come on up.
I just wanted to address a question or one of the comments that Sharon made. So when I did the water quality testing, that was not under McLean Mill Society. That was as West Coast Aquatic, so Stewardship Association. So what we did was we actually had water quality testing that we did on 23 sites around the city of Port Alberni. It was a one-off. We got funding from the Royal Bank. And the results were kind of up and down all over the city, like fecal coliform and all that type of thing. We shared that with City Council and CAO of the day. This is a couple councils ago now. And provided that information to Sharon and John. Sharon and John contacted us. We provided that information to them. But what is we need to be very clear about is when we were doing that on a fisheries basis. So water quality drinking guidelines are considerably different than fish when you're testing for fisheries. And what you're testing for is completely different. Anyway, we shared that with them. We told them that we didn't have, we're only testing for fish, but we can give them the information. And that information was shared with Environment Canada, and it is available. So if any city wants to see any of that information, we can give that to you.
Thank you for clarifying. And Mr. Adams, I will give you another opportunity to speak once everyone else has had a chance. So we will welcome up people who want to speak for a second time, but we want to give everyone else a chance to speak for a first time first. Mr. Cook? Yep.
Thank you, Madam Chair, or Mayor, and Council for having this opportunity for me to speak to you. I'm Jeffrey Cook. I live in Port Alberni on Church Street. I've been resident of the city for 60 years. I'm of the opinion that you have a tough decision to make. There's lots of variables, and of course you've heard a lot of comments from the audience here. But my thought is always to think about what do you want this place to look like 20 years from now, 30, 40, 50 years from now. You know, I know you when you sit at the council, you're here for 4 years, and your mandate is only 4 years. We always got to think about what about the mandate beyond that? You know, how am I going to impact my community? How am I going to benefit my community? And this is going to cost me. I'm sure in some instances it will depend on your opinion, because people, in my view, people seem to be very short-sighted on the way they think. They want to think about tomorrow or yesterday and tomorrow. For me, I want to think about my children, my grandchildren, and how is it going to, will it benefit? How will it benefit them? So speaking about this and other things, like I know there's always a cost factor, but when you think about cost factors, there's cost factors in everything that we think about. We may not be in favor of some of the cost factors. I'll just use an example. It's not my personal opinion, but you know, we pay hospital taxes, we pay school taxes. that doesn't really impact me because I don't have any kids in school. I've only utilized the hospital maybe 1 or 2 times in my lifetime. So at the same time, I know it's a benefit overall to the community, and I really appreciate that I do pay some of those taxes. And I think this may be one of those situations at McLean Mill that I may not utilize the site, even though I've been out there a few times. But at the same time, is it going to pay dividends to the community in the long run? I believe it will, but that's my personal opinion. I know there's some issues right now with the site and with the management, with a host of other things. But if you really look carefully and think about it, I think a lot of them can be resolved. So that's my 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cook. And the gentleman at the back.
How you doing? My name's Rod Gledhill, 2154 Motion Drive. Thanks for having me, guys. Basically, I'm railway engineer and track foreman for the Alberni Pacific Railway. I've been a long-standing volunteer and employee of McLean Mill Society, IHS. My father, he was the APR mechanic previous to me and Patrick Williamson, and I guess the volunteer group that's doing it now. And basically, I'm here just to address you guys and say that there's been many good things that this whole group has done for the society, or for the city of Port Alberni and its people and the tourism industry. But there's also a lot of old stock idea in it. They want to see the place prosper and steam preservation for future generations. And I'm not an antique like that dude was talking about. So there is quite a selection of people who are willing to move forward with preserving this history for the community. I look at the model of the Duncan Forest Museum as an example. Half their staff is even younger than myself, or close to my age, and have been there for 30 plus years, and they make good money there. They have money to restore other locomotives, and they look outside the box for events other than things such as, Halloween trains and Christmas trains that go as far as Kitsuxis Bridge. There's a lot of capital to be made on the McLean Mill site and events, such as the 5-acre shaker. I helped set it up. I was there for the whole weekend, and it did well. And I think that there should be other opportunities such as that to excel and make the property viable for the taxpayers, because at the end of the day, people are pretty chapped about having to spend money for dams being busted and things breaking down, boiler tubes bursting and things like that. And eventually they're just going to stand up and say to hell with it. And I don't want to see that, because I've been around this locomotive and this place all my life. I used to play on number 7 when it was a Ladysmith when I was a little kid. So it's important to me. I not quite as involved as I once was because I've got a kid and but I don't want to see this go away. But I also understand from a few of the Cherry Creek people that there's a big environmental part of it as well. I think that needs to be fully studied. But as I said, everybody needs to work in harmony together. And sorry, I'm a little sick here. Everybody needs to work in harmony here and kind of work for a collective purpose for this whole property, or else it's not going to work, and some dude from Vancouver is going to put high-rises there. We don't want that. So put a pub out there, UFC fights, events, I don't know what it is, but something's got to change, because whatever's working currently isn't working quite well. But there are some people in play that are trying their best to make it work. And yeah, sorry, I'm not a public speaker, so thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. And I just want to ask our CAO to comment briefly on the work that we are doing with testing, just so that the public is aware. It's certainly by no means a finished process, but we are aware and taking it very seriously.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, and we do take the concerns from that site seriously. I can tell you that We're being regulated closely by Ministry of Environment, Fisheries, Health, and WorkSafe BC, to name a few, who are involved. I'd like to read you a quick excerpt from an email from an engineer who's leading for us on the dam remediation project, and regarding the site testing and contamination. So this excerpt says, regarding the ongoing testing and contamination investigation, we have retained Clough/Terra West to undertake a stage 1 preliminary site investigation for the site. They want to undertake that work before proposing additional testing in the mill pond or other locations on the site. This seems sensible to me, that we work up an overall plan for additional testing based on the investigation and execute it all at once. The stage 1 testing is just getting underway. This was about 10 days ago, and they anticipate completing it in 4 weeks. The estimated price tag for stage 1 and report is about $9,500. I think we should allow another $20,000 for additional testing. So that's where we're at as far as the testing part. We're doing a stage 1 for the entire site, which makes sense to me too, that we would, and the stage 1 involves a historical review of the site and activities there, so that we can, our consultants can advise where to take further testing.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Oliver was next.
Bear with me. Don't put the clock on me until I get up there.
I'll tell you when the clock is starting.
Beware when somebody says they're going to be brief, but I will try. In listening here today, I think one of the things that we all should keep in mind, and it was someone said it a few years ago, and of course my failing memory, I don't know who, but it was, when you don't know where you come from, it's kind of hard to figure out where you should be going. So I think preserving our past is important. And I look at McLean Mill as a treasure. And I think that there's a lot of potential. And I think, the volunteers have done an excellent job, but I think what we have to do going forward is get more involvement with the community in some of the events they have, i.e. the sail pass at Christmas and that, where we can tie our operation in with that particular event. And I think it'll go a long way. Steam trains, and tourist railways are a real draw, and just about every one of them around North America is successful. So anyway, I'm not going to say any more. I put a little submission in, and I'm going to let council go over that, and thank everybody for coming out.
Thank you very much. And just so you know, and for others who have put written submissions in as well, we will include them, as our city clerk said, I think probably on our next public agenda as input. Just at the back there. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Nathan Brownridge. I'm new, a little bit new to town, but I've been coming around here for many years, and I've had the privilege to assist in the cosmetic restoration of the two-spot number 2, and I volunteered much of my time at the shop there. I'm actually a good friend of the previous speaker, Rod Gladhill there. I've made a couple of notes here. I'm not much of a public speaker, as again, I'm sure you guys can all know, but a few things. We talked about children and heritage of where we come from, and where we're going. I've personally seen the looks and the interest and the pure passion that come over little kids when they get around this equipment. They get invited up into the cab, they get to look, they see. Now, it is true that there is a generation that really isn't interested in it, right? I mean, this is something we're all faced with attention spans and, our history being forgotten. I believe that if we don't continue to preserve these fine assets of our past, we won't have any more people become interested in it. I witnessed a fellow from California come up and volunteer his time in the Roundhouse. Charlie's his name. I can't remember his last name there, but he's come up a couple of years and just volunteered, completely passionate. He's only in his 20s. There are lots of people out there. There was a woman who came from England with 180,000 Facebook follower people just to come and see the train and to see the steam aspect of this town. So in regards to that, that's how much I believe it's important. For going forward with the multiple agencies, I believe that there's a an issue of transparency, and I think that was mentioned right at the beginning there. I don't know the complete details, but I think that there's, from the time I spent around, there's a lot of unanswered questions between the societies about stuff and a lot of confusion. Also, we talk about books and where's the money gone from the beginning. We might not ever know, but moving forward, we might want to think about the contractors and the people we're going to give the money to that are going to get this. What kind of profit margins are we going to allow to be taken from this money that we're all taking, right? That's about it on that. And as far as the contamination goes, it sounds like the contamination, a lot of these products that are spilling over are from long before the city ever acquired the asset, right? So that could almost be assumed as the federal government kind of flunking over the liability of all this into your hands. However, there could be legal precedent to reach back and say, hey, you guys need to come back here and deal with this thing that you stuck us with, because we obviously can't afford. I've been in reclamation in the oil field on the other sides of the mountains and stuff, and it is true this stuff does cost a lot of money, and that is definitely something that we'll be facing in the future. But those are my notes. That's about all I can come up with right now. I won't take anybody else this time. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor and City Council here, for giving everybody the opportunity to contribute to this important thing. Anyways, thanks a lot. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. And Ms. Franker?
Hi, my name's Mel Franker. I'm a retired school bus driver, as some of you might know, and also the Beaufort Gang leader. I started that almost 20 years ago. I have my picture from Japan, China, Germany, Spain, Italy, you name it, I'm on it. People have taken my picture from robbing the train. So it's not, we've filled the train a lot of times. What's the capacity on the train? 182. 182. So the Beaufort Gang has filled it, lots. So we do get a lot of tourism, and we get a lot of people asking, can we do this, can we do that at the mill? So I'm just letting you know that there is a lot of people interested from out of town. I know it's hard for some in town, but it's out of town people that we would like to see them come in more. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Come on up.
Well, most of you probably know me, but I'm Sue Campbell. I moved here with my parents in 1949. In 1951, I worked at McLean's Mill, and I walked to the top of the mountain. We surveyed all the timber limits. We spent the whole summer doing that. Anyway, I'm pretty familiar with the place. Lots of people come here. Lots of people spend money. All we hear is there's millions spent on the mill, but we never hear how much money is spent and retained in the community, and how much potential there is for more money to stay in the community if to keep the place running. And that's all I got to say.
Thank you very much. Come on up. You're distracting me. Well, I will get to him. I'm not starting your timer yet.
Am I here now? My name is Jack James. I'm from the J.J. Logan Show. I know a few of you sitting at the table. Dan, I know him many years, and I know Timmy. But I know this guy. This guy. I know you. Oh, for heaven's sake, I know this one. Hey, you behind him. Gee whiz. But anyway, I set up the J.J. Logan Show because I had the experience, and I passed it on. I had a great time. It was more fun, and I had the guys with me. We had more fun. We told lots of stories. They weren't lies. They were true stories. But the one I want to tell is I've been in the woods 50 years. And I quit when I was 60. Now, that's no lie. I was 11 years old when I started. I did every job in the woods, even make beds and wash dishes. That's when I started. So, but I had a great time doing it because it was during World War II, and I was making $3 a day. And I ended up, I made $6,000 a month. I could never figure that out. But I took it. But this McLean Mill is one of the greatest things there is. I'll tell you, my dad built a mill in the Nimkish Valley in the 40s. He tried to get me to work in it, and no way would I work with it. I ended up out in the rigging, but Mill and I didn't get along. So I figured out a way to get out of the mill. So I saw a guy fall in the truck and get in a logging truck and go and change his clothes. It's about 11 o'clock in the morning. So I thought, by God, that's a good way I can get out of this mill. So I did the same thing, fell in the truck. And Dad says, go home and change your clothes at 11 o'clock. And boy, this is good deal. So on the third morning I fell in, he said, just keep going. So that's what I did. And that's how I got in the rigging, and that's how I learned my business. And it was a great experience to be a BC logger. You know, they didn't even class us as men in them days when I started. Like, I'll tell you another story. You ever heard of the CPR and the Union steamships? We used to travel up and down the coastline. Well, I was on the Cassiar going to a camp, and it broke down. So he had to phone another boat to get us to where we were going. And the captain says, her help to the CPR boat, and he says, well, how many passengers you got? He said, I got 100 passengers and 200 loggers. We weren't even classed as men. So, you know, this, what we're doing out there brings back all these stories, that logging show. And I tell quite a few of them. Some of them might be a little overbalanced, but most of them are facts. So I just like to tell the people sitting here that this McLean Mill, we should support it because it's the greatest. And one young fellow was talking here, there's a guy over here. He said, who is going to fill in for us? Well, we got to start training. And that's what I've been doing. I got my young fella, Aaron Tom, you all heard of him. He does the rigging for me now. I can't go up the spar tree because I'll fall out. But I used to do it, lots of it. I used to rig all them trees. And we got to keep thing going, because I might be good for one more tree. I'm 87 years old, so I'm not as spry as I used to be. I had a hell of a time getting over here from that tree. But anyway, I sure just like to see the people of Port Alberni supporting us old loggers and us volunteers, because we enjoy it. And I got some support over there. I still got old Soup Campbell supporting me. So anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Joel Larson. I'm a local business owner. I live at 3929.
Sorry,
11th
just one
Avenue.
second.
Hello. Hi there, everyone. My name is Joel Larson. I'm a local business owner. I live at 3929 11th Avenue. Thank you, Sherry, for the mortgage. If we take a look around this room, I'm not sure whether or not these cameras looking at me are going to pick it up, but there's about 4 large poster boards in here. And one of the 4 starts off straight up just by saying heritage. And it also says culture. So I feel as if whoever you hired to do these didn't think that these are very important to be together, wouldn't have put them on the same poster board. Now, I have about 160 volunteer hours logged up at the arena. I have some family ties there with some vehicles in there, and I got a great passion for that. I've been trying to be involved in all the public events going on between McLean's Mill and the arena especially. There's lots of kids coming up there for school. And if we don't embrace what the heritage that we have, then, I mean, we can look around again. There's the other poster board right here says building a city. Well, aren't half of those black and white photos? And just to finish off, at the back of the room is all the previous councillors. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Hugh?
My name's Hugh Grist. I don't live in the city. I live in Cherry Creek, but I've been a volunteer since the beginning, 1980. I just want to give you some figures that we've heard, and there's no profit being out there. I made these presentations to council for a number of years until 2016. And of the 2/3 of the people who come and ride the train and go to the mill are from out of town. The average spending based on tourism across Canada, based on other railways, generates $1.3 million in other revenue. She's buying gas stations, hotels. I gave you those figures year after year, and I'm sure they're increased now because the costs are even more. So don't forget, there's a lot of money being left in this town from that 12,000, 15,000 people that come here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think there was a hand in that back corner. Yes, come on up.
Good afternoon. My name is Bob East, and I live out Cherry Creek, but all the way to the end, so I'm not in the city. But I have been involved with the Industrial Heritage Society for a lot of years, and spent most of my time on the truck end of things. What I've seen from talking to the new MMS committee in the last couple of years and looking at ourselves, we're a bunch of old guys. We love to play, but we don't know how to market. And you've certainly heard that today, marketing, promotions. I did hear last week, there's people from Tofino, Ucula, tourists that have to come back to town because they've marketed so well. They're full out there. And yet, we've got a lot of opportunity here. Personally, Cliff here and myself went down 3 years ago I've been 4 times to the States, to the American Truck Historical Association, which puts on about 900 trucks at a truck show and a convention once a year. And I've gone down 4 times now. We've taken down twice. We've taken down the city artifacts, low beds. We do our best to raise all the funds we can from contractors, truckers, loggers, whoever we can get some donations from. And we find that no matter where we've gone in parades in Victoria, it doesn't matter where we go, we're the ambassadors for the city, and everything we have is promotions for the city. Trains, McLean's Mill, and actually very little for ourselves for the trucks. There isn't enough room for all the signs. But we're going back down again this year, or hoping to go back down with a low bed load again. This time the convention's in Reno in the end of March. And what I've seen from talking in folks in the past down there, they don't know about us until we mention McLean's Mill. And they know the steam. And you're talking to people that are truck guys, but they love the heritage and love the old stuff. And I've heard from the logging guys that the people that come up from Oregon because a special event of a new spar tree or something going on. And we don't seem to have a good way of marketing that information, presenting that out there. And I think when you're looking at budgeting, I don't know what % should be going, but I'm sure there's numbers out there that well-known established places could tell you should be getting this kind of money out. And we're doing the same thing again this year, trying to market the town when we're on the road for about a week with the equipment. Thank you, and keep it up.
Thank you very much. Okay. Are there further people who would like to speak? Are we out of people who came to give opinions? Okay. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I found this very valuable. I know that we have a lot more input to take, and the beauty of Committee of the Whole meetings is we don't make decisions. So, you know, if the newspaper does a story on this, if the radio does a story on this, it will draw more public input in a variety of mediums. And that information is really important for council to hear before we make decisions. So I would imagine this will come to maybe not our next meeting of council, probably the one following that, where we'll continue this discussion, and probably council will give direction for staff to come back with some options. But again, I want to really thank everyone for coming today, and know that we have heard all of your input and look forward to talking about this more. Would somebody like to move adjournment? So moved. Is there a seconder? Second, Madam Mayor. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. What is it?